Some of you out there may think that people in general are pretty good and they want the best for you. Well, I've got news for you. No, they don't, especially avoidants. In fact, avoidants want you to suffer. And we've got some proof related to that, so stay tuned.
Hi, my name is Renee.
My name is David.
And for the last 16 years, we have together been coaching women in healing their attachment pathology, as well as in the area of dating and relationships. Together, we've produced dozens of online courses and programs, helping women attract the love of their life, keep them, and also, most importantly, gain their emotional commitment.
And we've been doing that for the last 16 years.
Yes.
It's been a long time. And over that time, we've seen a lot of different problems, a lot of different pathology as well, especially when it comes to attachment. So let's talk about avoidance and why they want you to suffer in this video, because I can promise you, no, not everyone has good intentions for you.
Not everyone has your back.
No, exactly. Yeah. And for avoidance, especially, we're talking about, let's categorize avoidance quickly.
Yeah.
So we have, and this is a framework that was popularized by Kim Bartholomew back in 1990 when she did her PhD. So we have fearful avoidant versus dismissive avoidant. Now, in our spectrum, we normally categorize fearful avoidant as somewhat ambivalent or anxious to avoidant. They swing between anxious and avoidant, whereas dismissive avoidant are what we call true avoidants. They're on the other side of the spectrum. They're quite extreme in their personality, their attachment style, etc. And that is the opposite of secure attachment. So think of secure as the only non-pathological attachment style. They're on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So that gives you an idea of...
They're way over here. They are not so easy to have intimate relationships with. So let's start this by discussing a very important study done by a man named Sroufe, S-R-O-U-F-E. Long ago, he was studying preschoolers in a classroom setting. And one preschooler, a little girl, had somehow managed to hurt and cut her lip, and she was bleeding. And he was observing the different ways in which these children reacted to this little girl in distress. Obviously, she had an injury, and for preschoolers, this is a big thing, you know, like if you see kids, if you've ever taken care of kids, they cry when they get hurt. It's a big deal, right? So Sroufe categorized these preschoolers' behaviors based upon these children's attachment styles. I'm going to read out his observations to you so that you can understand what he was seeing in these children. What he said was, the secure preschoolers seem to have more empathy for peers in distress. Ambivalent children, by contrast, so that's the anxious children, seemed too preoccupied with their own needs to have feelings left over for others. And avoidant children sometimes seemed to take pleasure in another child's misery. Now, let me explain what that would have looked like. So in the study, he was talking about how some of these avoidant children reacted to the little girl's cut lip and the crying by saying things like, oh, you're a crybaby, by minimizing her distress, by pushing down her vulnerability as if it was wrong to have that vulnerability, to have that distress. The secure children, by contrast, would rush to her aid, would be there by her side, at the very least offer some level of empathy, like, what's wrong? What happened? Are you okay? The anxious, ambivalent children tended to cling on to the adults in the room, and some of them would touch their lip and say, oh. So the other girl's distress amplified their own distress, as you can imagine for a child who hyperactivates their attachment system, meaning they exaggerate the anxiety and the distress in their own system. Seeing someone else in distress amplifies their own distress. So they were trying to seek proximity for safety.
For their own comfort.
Yeah. So we're not accusing avoidants of being inherently evil people. That's not what we're trying to say. We're trying to say that the very neglect that they experienced changed their psyche, their psychology, and their emotional system in a way such that they can't actually give space to other people's vulnerability. And we don't even need to discuss them giving space for their own vulnerability, because they just don't do that. They don't allow vulnerability in themselves.
They don't have the capacity to do so.
Yeah.
And as the saying goes, misery loves company. Well, these kids, these kindergartners, have such a lack, these avoidant ones, have such a lack that lack, they want to pass that lack on to others, basically. Right? That's kind of what is happening. Yeah. And by the way, so in this study, they used ambivalent. So if you just swap ambivalent with fearful avoidant, and avoidant with dismissive avoidant, if that's the framework that you use, that's completely fine. But just understand that's the framework that they used.
Because fearful avoidant and dismissive avoidant are very new terms in this whole attachment theory realm. Prior to that, you know, Mary Ainsworth, who did the strange situation experiment, she had the three categories. It was secure, anxious, ambivalent, and avoidant. And that's what we like to use. But because everyone else seems to like fearful avoidant and dismissive avoidant,
Yeah, that was popularized by Kim Bartholomew back in 1990 in her PhD. So a lot of people use that framework, dismissive avoidant, fearful avoidant. It's okay, it doesn't matter. As long as you understand that ambivalent is basically fearful avoidant and that's based in anxiety rather than distance, rather than avoidance. So I think truly avoidant people have such a huge lack that they get that there's a lack there. There's nothing they can do to change that. There's nothing because they do not have the capacity to create better relationships in their lives. And in the same study, Struth found that in these kindergartners, the most popular kids in the classes are always the securely attached kids. Always, because they have the capacity to form relationships, to attune to those relationships, to calibrate. And guess what? They have the most value for other kids. They're the most valuable in the community because they're more attuned and they're able to have empathy. They're able to respond appropriately and relate to people. That's value in a social sense. And the avoidant ones, avoidant children, understand that they don't have the same value and they can never climb that social ladder. So as a result, they go, okay, well, the only way for me to improve my standing is to drag other people down.
Yeah, it's a fascinating observation.
So they want to spread that misery. And it's I think it's very, very intuitive to those avoidant ones. As a secure person myself, it's very hard to relate to that. But just understand that not everyone's like you or me. People are different. And yes, that's the strategy that some people will intuitively take on in order to improve their own chances. And they will laugh at you when you suffer. And that's how it is.
Yeah, and I guess when you begin life thousands of steps behind other securely attached children, you're not just always playing catch up, but you're always comparing yourself and noticing that you don't quite know what is necessarily wrong with you, but you notice that other people seem capable of forming bonds with others and having those bonds last and having those bonds actually benefit everyone involved. And you see that for some strange reason, you don't seem to be able to have the same skills. And you're not always sure why, because look, at the end of the day, it's not the avoidant's fault. It's the fault of their caregivers, okay? I want to be clear with that. It's not the avoidant's fault. But you notice as an avoidant that you can't foster and build these bonds. But at the same time, you notice that those people who can do it seem to have so much more abundance in their own life. And the thing with avoidance also, it's very important to remember this, is that because they haven't had the privilege of building up skills to attach and bond to others and build strong, loyal, mutually beneficial relationships, they are much more vulnerable to envy, okay? Because at the end of the day, a lot of the real value us humans get in lives is through our relationships, whether it be romantic relationships or friendships. When you cannot sustain that, or let alone build it, what is left? What's left is a lot of the most primal negative emotions that us humans have. And I don't necessarily like to frame human emotions at all as negative, but they are when you cannot regulate them. And avoidants can't. They have no way of regulating. That's the very nature of avoidance. Your caretakers weren't there when you had distress. They were absent. You were rejected. You were abandoned. Therefore, you never got the opportunity to develop a nervous system that intuitively knows how to regulate emotions. You don't even have the mental space, the thoughts available to downregulate your distress. Okay, and because of that, you are left with potentially a lot of envy that you have to either ignore or just live with. And I guess that's another reason why avoidants tend to really don't like people being close, because they're magnified. These types of primal emotions become magnified, and you know you're shortchanged in some way. You may not have the memories to access how you became like this, but you know something's not quite right.
Yeah. So for a lot of avoidance, it's me against the world. And that's the blueprint for every single action, every single scenario. It's me versus the world.
Exactly.
And it's a zero-sum game. So if I get more, other people need to get less.
Yeah.
So that's the game that they play. And they prefer if you got less than more, because that intuitively means that there's perhaps more for them.
Yeah.
That's the game that they play. So at the end of the day, true avoidance, they don't even mean it. They have no other way to go around it. They just want people to suffer because, like they've suffered. That's their blueprint. That's their center of gravity.
And can you imagine that feeling of finality when you, as an avoidant who doesn't have the emotional and psychological resources to build something for themselves, something meaningful, something abundant, but you notice other people can do it. You feel like you can't do it. There's a sense of finality to that. Because as humans, we really rely on our caretakers and our parents and our upbringing to transfer resources, okay, to us through nurturing. And later on, through knowledge. Chances are, if you weren't given nurturing through your caregivers, how are they going to give you skills later on? If they didn't care enough to be there when you were an infant, how are they going to give you skills later on? They might be able to give you, certain procedural, logistical, technical skills, don't get me wrong. And some avoidants do go on to be successful on the surface. It's just that you can't build beyond a certain point. There's a sense of infinity in the psyche of securely attached people. In terms of emotional regulation, there's a researcher called Mikulinsa and Shaver. They call this the broaden and build philosophy, where securely attached people, when they have negative emotions, they find ways through it and they actually build upon their positive emotions. My meaning from that is that there's infinity in secure people. In avoidance, in insecurely attached people, the more insecurely attached you get, it's the opposite. It's not infinity. Yeah. It's like you started many steps behind. Yeah, fragile.
Fragile in terms of their state, I guess.
Yeah.
Where secure people have so much more resource or resourcefulness, they kind of are anti-fragile, to borrow a term from the book Anti-Fragile. They're anti-fragile, so they see a challenge and they overcome the challenge with their resourcefulness, and as they do, they become more, whereas insecurely attached people, they don't have the resources to overcome their challenge. They can only mitigate it, they can only manage it, and as they do, they don't become more.
That reminds me of a quote by a personal development guy named Brendan Burchard. He's popular on YouTube, some of you may know him, but he said that he's worked with billionaires, and the one trait that all these billionaires had was that they trusted themselves. Doesn't matter what they were going through, but they believed in their own ability to work it out. So they believed in their ability to get through the challenges. No matter how insurmountable the challenge seemed, they believed and trusted themselves to find a way. And although, as I said, insecurely attached people can have success, especially those avoidants who have done nothing with their lives other than focusing on so-called outward success. Of course, if you spend enough time badgering on something, you'll produce something in the end. There just isn't that sense of infinity. So if you're curious to know not only your core attachment style, but to get a score for how securely attached you are, we actually have a free quiz. It's a quick 3-minute quiz that you can take, and you can find out where you sit on the attachment spectrum, and make sure that you read the explanation afterwards if you take the quiz. To get access to that free quiz, just go to Renee's links. And also, I recommend you read the free email newsletter that we'll send you afterwards, because there's tons of important information in there, lots of golden nuggets that you may find valuable in your own life and take away into your relationships.
And go do the quiz now, because at the end of the day, the more you understand this framework, the more power you have, not just with yourself, but with the people around you. And, honestly, most people who do this quiz, we've had 20,000 maybe do the quiz. I think it's a very, very small percentage of people who actually end up in the avoidant category, which is on the other end of the extreme of the spectrum. And partially because maybe avoidant people wouldn't care enough to do it in the first place.
Exactly.
But it's still a small percentage of the actual population who are on the avoidant end of the spectrum. Yeah. But it's going to give you the knowledge, the awareness, the understanding of what this whole framework, how it works, and what it means to you when it comes to interpersonal relationships. So very important. Go read it. It'll be the most valuable, most important thing you'll do all day long.
Yeah, even all week or all year.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.